welcome to the show on what I think, I hope, I pray is the last of these god-awful, terrible winter days going on out there. I can't stand it. At least out west and out east, they're buried in snow. I don't care what people think. Being in a winter country sucks. Today I'm going to have a guest on. His name is Paul McGregor. He's of the America Fund, and he's one of those fellas pushing and promoting for the America 51st thing. I mean, the merger might help economically, but I don't know if it'd be able to do anything with our climate. But at least I wouldn't have to cross a border to try and escape somewhere warmer. So maybe that's one of the aspects in the plus side of the check-off box on things. Lots of other things going on today, too. News, updates, and rants and more. So be sure to use that comment thing, guys. We're live, chat with each other, send questions my way. I see them all. I don't necessarily respond to them all, but it lets me know you're there, you're watching. I'm not talking to nobody out there. And it keeps things interesting. So let's talk about interesting as well. This show is brought to you guys today by New World Precious Metals, and they're based right here in Alberta. Years of inflationary money printing and rising debt have decimated the average Canadian savings. Gold and silver are the only currencies that have held their value for thousands of years. Last year saw 30% gains. I mean, gold's just going through the roof, guys. NWPM offers unique platforms to help protect and grow your hard-earned wealth with gold and silver. So check them out, newworldpm.com. If you want to hedge against the dollar, that's the way to go. All right, let me bring things a little closer to home and talk about something going on in Alberta. It's been kind of overshadowed a bit, but it's getting ready to blow up further. So, I mean, despite the best efforts of unions, legacy media, and activist groups over nearly 2 years now to chip away at support for Danielle Smith's premiership, they haven't really been able to crack her support in Alberta. The coronation of Naheed Nenshi as NDP leader garnered them no new traction. And I mean, while Smith's government hasn't been surging in the polls, they haven't had much to fear from the moribund NDP. But that might all change and fast. I mean, we got a recipe for a perfect storm coming together, and if it blows up, it could spell the demise of the Smith government. Alberta's legacy media outlets and the NDP, they're salivating right now. This story is one of possible corruption within the ranks of the provincial cabinet. Procurements and contracts may have been improperly awarded, and senior bureaucrats might have been pressured and even fired for resisting pressure to direct funds towards certain service providers. I mean, that story on its own sounds bad enough. And with the issue emanating from the health department, it becomes a potential catastrophe. I mean, citizens hate seeing public funds being misappropriated. You would think they'd be getting used to seeing it in Canada. But they hate even more when the misdoings appear to be happening in the sacred healthcare file. This is the sort of thing that can lead to a collapse in public support for a party, and fast. The affair, that's a tongue twister, appears. I got to write things differently. It'll be more of a he said, she said state right now. The recently fired CEO of Alberta Health Services has filed a lawsuit for wrongful dismissal and is packed with troubling allegations. She's seeking $1.7 million, and she's pretty strongly motivated to take a run at the government to get it. Is it a case of a bureaucrat scorned taking it out on the government, or is she a whistleblower exposing deep rot in government practices? I mean, right now, anyways, what's lacking is solid evidence. Anybody can make allegations in a lawsuit. Until they're proven in court, though, they are nothing more than allegations. Still, this file has been passed to the Auditor General, the Ethics Commissioner, and the RCMP. So far, the RCMP hasn't indicated they've seen any criminal wrongdoing yet. That might change. I don't know. We need evidence. Naheed Nenshi, of course, is trying his hardest to make hay from this issue. He ridiculously and prematurely demanded the resignation of the Premier, and in his zeal, he's already kind of undermined his own credibility on the affair. That doesn't mean there's nothing there, though. And if Nenshi manages to get his hands on some solid evidence, people might start nodding their heads in agreement when he starts calling for resignations. Premier Smith must get on top of this issue as soon as possible. It took precious days before she even addressed it at all when it broke, and she's really kind of avoided commenting in depth on it when possible. I mean, on a weekend radio show, she reiterated that she welcomes an investigation by the Auditor General, but that just won't be enough, obviously, at this point. The UCP government can't try to rag the puck on this issue and hope it fades over time. That tactic works well with federal scandals, but it won't cut it in Alberta. The issue is only going to grow, and internal party dissent is going to start growing. That's always the biggest risk for Conservatives. It's believable that the allegations were made more from spite than fact, but Smith has been trying to reform the bloated healthcare bureaucracy in Alberta, and many insiders are eager to derail her efforts. If that's the case, though, it must be fought, not deferred. Premier Smith must come out swinging rather than trying to stay in the background. The pending trade war and tariff issues have granted the UCP some cover on this issue. A scandal at the top levels of healthcare management would typically be at the top of the headlines for weeks, but it's struggling for notice as national issues overshadow it. The scandal won't go away, though. It's just festering in the background. Alberta's healthcare system needs serious reforms. It would be tragic if Smith backed off from battling that monster due to a potential scandal as today. She's backed off on a provincial police force and a provincial pension plan. If she shies away from healthcare reform, she won't have accomplished a heck of a lot of substance in her first term as premier, despite coming in with high aspirations. Albertans must see some decisive action from the premier. We need transparency to expose exactly what has happened, and some heads must roll indeed if there was malfeasance. If the government tries to hunker down and let this blow over, it's going to lead to a rot which may return the NDP to power in 2 more years. This is the biggest challenge Premier Smith has faced since assuming the leadership. Let's hope she doesn't let it become the one that brings her down. Now, of course, since I wrote that monologue, I found out there's going to be a press conference coming up this afternoon where Premier Smith's going to address this very thing. So hopefully she responds to a lot of the questions I've put out there. But we'll find out more on what's going on in the news and things out there with our news editor, Dave Naylor. Dave, how's it going today?
Yeah, it's going okay, Cory.
Yeah.
So tell me, would you prefer the bitterly cold temperatures of Alberta or the waist-high snow of Ontario?
It's tough. It
Because
really
you've
is.
got a long driveway.
Yeah, I do. That's true, actually, come to think of it. Yeah, I guess I could deal with the cold temperatures better, but I don't like either. I really don't.
I mean, fortunately, we just have to go from our warm house to our warm car, from the warm car to the warm work newsroom, and we don't have to spend any time out there shoveling, so there is that.
Well, the car I've got right now is the very first car I've ever had that had command start. And I tell you, once you've had that,
Oh, it's beautiful.
it's hard to go back. I mean, boy, having your morning coffee and just fire that thing up and let it warm up, it's a godsend.
Buddy of mine has a Jeep, and it wouldn't start because of the cold, and so the tow truck came over and gave it a boost this morning. To get a remote starter put in, they want $1,500.
Yeah, see, that's part of why I haven't had one before we came with the car.
Yeah,
in this
exactly.
case, so.
Exactly. If you're living in Alberta, you better make sure you got a electronic starter.
Yeah,
So.
it sure is a nice thing.
Anyways, another crazy news day. Folks at Democracy Watch, who do good work, have announced they're initiating a private prosecution of Justin Trudeau in the SNC-Lavalin affair. So that's good news. We may hopefully finally get some answers. A whole bunch of Quebec and environmental people got together, including the wonderful folks at the David Suzuki Foundation, and said these revived pipelines, or revived interest in Quebec pipelines and Canada or Energy East, it's just a mirage, and it'll never happen until we get some social accountability. And that comes with polls showing that the majority of Quebecers want these energy projects. Speaking of projects, the Prime Minister, who's only got 3 weeks left, has announced a multi-gazillion dollar deal to build high-speed rail from Toronto to Quebec, traveling at 300 kilometers an hour. I mean, they've been talking about this since we were young lads, and it will never be done, will it?
No, but they can spend billions studying
They
it.
can spend
can't they?
billions studying it.
I bet you a Quebec contractor's going to get it.
You think? I mean, and how does he have he has no moral authority to do this because he's an outgoing prime minister. He's a resigned prime minister. If Mark Carney wants to make himself look good, maybe he'll cancel it on day one. So we got another airplane falling out of the sky, this time in Tempe. Small aircraft this time that sent up huge plumes of black smoke, and unfortunately it looks like there's one person killed there. There's a CBC host, Cory, called Travis Danraj, and he's missing. He's missing in action. People have noticed that he hasn't been on his usual spot on CBC, and his lawyer put out a statement saying, yes, he's been put on leave, and everybody's sort of theorizing that he was too equal in his coverage. He wasn't focusing on liberals and NDPs. He was giving equal voice to conservative voices, and that's what got him pulled off.
Blasphemy in the state broadcaster.
Oh,
He's
it
got
is.
Catherine Marshall on their case now.
Yes,
That'll be
yes. So
interesting.
we know she's a good lawyer. We contacted CBC. They said we don't discuss this sort of stuff. We can only tell you he's still on the payroll. But he's on leave. One of the leaders of Freedom Convoy, Pat King, got 3 months, basically house arrest in his sentencing today. The Crown wanted 10 years, so that just shows you how ridiculous they are, and thank goodness the judge took it the right way. And our favorite friend, Robbie Starbuck, announced this week he's got Coca-Cola in his sights, and they will be the next target of his anti-DEI work coming up later on this week, so I look forward to that. And yes, you mentioned the Smith press conference on the healthcare scandal. Our alleged reporter James Snell will be all over that like a wet blanket.
Right on.
So
well,
big news. That's at 2:00.
Lots on the go. I mean, we don't
Lots
have
on
to
the go.
sweat finding things to write about.
No,
cover.
there's never a shortage, is there, these days?
All right, well, I'll let you get back at it, and I'll see you after the show.
Thanks, Cory.
Thanks. So, yes, as you can see, lots of stories breaking, constantly developing, moving. I can't even keep my monologues up with them. Hey, the reason we got the staff, people like that, the reason Dave can get this out for you is because you've been subscribing. So check it out, guys, westernstandard.news/subscription. It's $10 a month. $100 for a year. This is how we stay independent. This is how we aren't like the CBC that was just mentioned. You know, we allow independence here. We don't fire our people for speaking on the wrong subjects. I mean, people get fired around here, but not necessarily for that. Get on board, subscribe. Hey, consider taking out ads with us if you got a business or service you want to promote. Check it out. So westernstandard.news/subscription, just like a newspaper subscription. It's well worth it, and it keeps us going. You know, it's interesting seeing Robbie Starbuck, and people who aren't familiar with him, it gets confusing. I mean, the irony of his name, you know, with Starbucks being such a woke business to begin with and such. But his name is Starbuck. He's an activist in the United States. He has really been taking down, he's targeted DEI corporations that really over embrace the DEI and just makes it backfire on him. You know, all Robbie Starbuck does is expose it. He's just pointing it out. It's all there. It's always been there. And now he's targeting Coke, but he's gone after some like John Deere and Harley Davidson. It's going to be interesting with what he finds at Coca-Cola. And, you know, I'm liking this trend. I mean, people weren't paying attention to DEI before. Your average citizen wasn't paying attention to DEI. We're seeing at least Elon Musk and President Trump taking on DEI now because it's diversity, equity, inclusion. Hey, all nice, fluffy statements, and that's fine. You know what? I'd love a diverse, equitable, and inclusive world as well. But I also believe in merit, which I think trumps all bloody three of those things. There are diverse people who have excellent merit, and they rise to great positions in what they do. Leave it alone. Don't try to force it, and the cream will rise to the top. There's fantastic people out there. We don't need these stupid DEI policies. And they've been harming businesses. It's really a simple rule when running a business, running a government, running anything. You want to get the best people possible into the roles to do them. It doesn't matter who they are. And when you come into it, I mean, hey, let's face it, okay, fair enough. Things were wrong a long time ago, and I'm sure there's some individual businesses that still do it. There's some stupid business owners who'll say, I won't hire that person because they're black and I don't want them in my business. Well, that's a dumb business owner because they're narrowing their labor market. I mean, aside from the gross racism of it, they're just being stupid. But likewise, when you come in and set a quota the other way and start to look for other categories other than competency and merit, you're making your business worse. You're making it worse for people. You're making it worse for your own shareholders and for yourself, your own work environment. And it's kind of come up, and it seems to be peaking, and it's declining. You know, this thing's always a cycle. I mean, if you remember in the past, if you're kind of grayer like I am, it used to be affirmative action. That was big. That was kind of huge into, I think, the late 80s, early 90s. It was the same thing. And because it stunk, because it led to people getting into positions they shouldn't be in, or worse, some people who were really, really well qualified for positions they were in, but because of these programs, people would look and say, oh, that's a tokenism. That's a hire that they just brought in for that, which is really unfair for the people who work their butts off to get to those spots if they happen to be minorities. It's just a bad, ill-conceived, wrong concept, and it's fading and it's dying. So, you know, when I rant and get on things and moan about a lot of negative things, that's one positive development that's starting to rise. We're kind of getting to the crest of that cycle again on one of these bad trends, this foolish trends of DEI happening out there. People like Robbie Starbuck, people like Trump, and hopefully then it inspires some of the leaders in Canada to find the courage to take on these ridiculous programs, these idealistic idiocy notions, and just get back to some common sense in our governance and in our business world. All right, well, speaking of the Americans, we got our guest in studio. I like it when guests are in studio. We were talking a bit about that before. It makes the conversation easier. This is Paul McGregor of America Fund, and you're going to talk a bit about your organization and the concept. You know, as we said, 15 minutes isn't long enough, but we're gonna cover a bit of this in the America 51st. So welcome to the studio, and thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Cory. I appreciate you having us on. So, we did talk a little bit before. So, to explain a little bit about America Fund and some of the history and the kind of the group. So, it is a group of small businessmen who've gotten together and said, look, we want to take a look at this issue of statehood from a professional point of view, right? And get and bring in lawyers and bring in all of the specialists to look at this type of stuff. So there's a little bit of history with, of course, the two spokespeople at this point in time is myself, and I am and was the president of AB 51 project, which was a few years ago. And that the primary focus of AB 51 project was to look at the Constitution for Alberta, right? Give us some real details about what it could be and what it should be. And we brought in a whole group of people and a lot of very, very intelligent and well-educated people to look at that. So we've already got the basis for that. America Fund, of course, the other spokesperson is Peter Downing. So Peter and I, a little while back, and some other businessmen as well, we came together and partnered with America Fund as the mechanism by which we could fund, do the things that need to be done for AB 51 as a concept, right? Now, so that's a little bit about the group. And its focus is to educate people and say, look, there is a path. This is a good thing for Alberta, financially, economically, for our children, our grandchildren. This is a good thing, and really, in our view, really the only way to go forward, considering current geopolitical and geoeconomical circumstances. That look, we need to have a path to protect Albertans and Western Canadians as a whole, and give us something solid that we can actually that's been well thought out. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, so this concept's been around for quite a while.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier. I was working with Patrick Beauchamp, over
That's right.
25 years ago, and he was trying to promote it. It was difficult to get that concept out there, and that's where you're saying it's an educational concept. But it really has re-emerged on the scene. I don't know if it's taking widespread support on the ground, but people are talking about it more than ever, thanks to President Trump repeatedly mentioning that. Though he's been talking about the whole country as a 51.
So we've been looking at this a long time. Mm-hmm. We don't see it as a whole country thing. Now, okay. Economically, Canada's got a problem. Its governance is a problem. Everybody knows this. I mean, the Canadian system is broken. It's not fixable. A new leader goes in, same problems. It's already, and we were talking about this, Senate's already predetermined. Judiciaries are all predetermined. A Bill of Rights ain't worth the paper it's written on. Trucker convoy prove that. So the system's got a problem, and we need to really change that. But what we're interested in is dealing with Western Canada as a group, and like you've said, Cory, the separation thing is nothing new. It's just which direction do we go kind of deal, right? So right now, what happens is in crisis, people change. People want change. We're very excited. We see the best is yet to come, to be honest. There's two ways to look at a crisis, and anybody who's ever been successful in business or in investments, you look at a crisis, you can be scared, you can run, you can get out, and of course you lose, right? Or you can see it as an opportunity. And this is an opportunity for Alberta and Albertans to take control of their own governance and their future for themselves and their children.
So with this, I mean, that's part of it. Right now is at the educational point. You're kind of taking advantage of that. You've been at it for a long time, but now it's in the scroll. It's in the news.
Yeah.
People are looking at it. So
Yeah.
you want to now, I mean, your perspective is you want them to come out of it with a positive view on the concept.
Yes.
What kind of steps do you start working from there when you go beyond the educational? Like, what are the mechanisms? That's where it gets a little complicated.
And it does, and there's a lot of moving parts to that, as I said earlier. There's a lot of moving parts. Obviously, we need to look at, and we are working in this in the background. We need to look at the partnerships with businesses, Congress, Senate in the U.S. We need to look at the Constitution for Alberta and come up with something that is a viable path to be able to do this. Now, before, as you said, this has been talked about, but there was no path. Everybody's like, well, that's great, Paul, or whoever the spokesperson was at the time. And but how do we actually do this? I mean, Clarity Act, forget about it. Right, you got 51%. It's got to go to the Parliament. 3/4 of the Parliament have to agree. It's never going to happen. It's set up for a failure. But now that we have an American protectorate and an offer that says, okay, you know what, guys, you can come in to the mansion at this point in time. We have a lot going on economically in Canada, and with foreign nations and foreign interference. That's all over the news. I won't get into the weeds of that, but I mean, really, just look at what's going on. So having that offer and the ability to work with these people. So in the background, to answer your question, we're working with individuals at high levels to be able to work out the details. We've got a constitutional basis. We're going to be releasing all that information. And what's interesting about that, Cory, is it gives the Western provinces the chance to have a say in how that looks. There's so many wonderful constitutions out there, and we talk. I mean, I'm Treaty Indian as well. So when we talk about for Indian nations, I mean, they're going to have way more than they would in Canada, 100% resource ownership. And it's the same thing with the state. The state has that. The government can't dictate your economic decisions. We can't have a Japan losing $1 trillion deal on LNG in Alberta because the Eastern Canada, the Laurentian elite say, no, we don't want you to have that over there. And so guess who's getting it now? The U.S., right? They're looking at it. What could that have done for our people, right? So those are the things we're looking at.
Yeah, well, the economic case is very solid, though it still needs to be
Yeah.
expanded and made to people because they don't necessarily understand that.
Yeah.
At some point, though, you have to approach the political class. Like we
Yes.
have a broken system, but we have a mechanism we are within, and
Yes.
and people will expect that we're going to need some elected support at some
Absolutely.
point. So now we start talking to you, looking at should federal parties become engaged, provincial parties.
So
existing parties take
personally,
on the
I
council.
don't believe the federal option is an option because you're working in a system that's already broken to begin with. So how do you do that? I think more on the provincial side and working with premiers and so on and so forth that will look at this. The people need the option. Right now we have this, excuse me for saying, fake Team Canada thing that really is not looking at the interests of individual provinces. They're looking at a governmental system and maintaining that. We have Pierre Poilievre, former Stephen Harper. Love these guys. Okay, that's not the issue there, but their response was that Canadians should have any amount of suffering to maintain the name. This is just a fake line where that creates this whole country. And what we need to do is look at our own areas and our own people and have our leaders like Premier Smith and so on and so forth. And I realize that they have their own supporters and their own viewpoints, so on and so forth. But people need to have it as an option, Cory, that they say, look, here's the option, here's Canada, it's like I was saying when my kids were young and they needed to make a big decision. I'd say, look, get out of the emotions. Let's put the pros and cons down, right? And let's see what's good for our future. It's not about how I feel about it particularly, and I'm not ignoring or throwing out the emotions. There is an emotional sense to this, but for us, we're Albertans first, we're Westerners first, and because that's our home, that's our backyard, that's my living room we're talking about here, and so that's what's important. And I think the governments, yes, we have to approach them, and I think we're ready and to talk to them and to say, look, guys, you need to present an option to the people and stop the fear-mongering, because the fear-mongering isn't going to do anything but make everybody weak. And that's a problem.
So the discussion's been brought out for President Trump. He's brought a lot of discussions out.
Yeah.
I wonder how much necessarily it's interesting to watch. I mean, I've been observing. So
Yeah.
to some degree, I think it's kind of galvanized a sense of patriotism among Albertans, even within Canada. As you said, there's some of that Team Canada, whether it's misgiven. I mean, I think some of it, as you say, it's strategic on Trump's part.
Yes.
But when one of an analogy I use in a sense is, Alberta and the rest of Canada, or Alberta, Eastern Canada, have been like in a domestic dispute and squabbling for a long time. Yeah. But you got to watch it when you step in between a couple that's having a domestic dispute, because you could find both of them turning on you.
Yeah.
And say, hey, I can't stand that one, but this isn't your business. Let us sort this out, and then we'll talk with you. I'm just saying that it's brought the discussion up, but I think it might have made some people dig their heels in.
Sure, and you know what? Look, controversy brings a conversation. We were saying that at least the conversation's happening, and once all the emotions settle down, and the crises builds, unfortunately. What's happened with the Team Canada approach is to counter tariff, and I said this before, everybody talks about, Trump came in and just tariffed us and it's a terrible thing that he's done. Well, wait a second. We've been tariffing the U.S. for years, and forget about 25%, 200, 250%. You can't even buy cheese and get across the border, without having a massive tariff. I had one border agent say, and I have wide latitude, I can charge up to 400% tariffs on it. None of that's been mentioned. It's all like a military takeover in the sense of that's the emotion. But what are we protecting? We're protecting carbon tax. We're protecting this relationship that has basically said Alberta has only one purpose, which is since its inception. Clifford Sifton said the purpose of the West was to enrich Canada, and at that time Canada was Upper and Lower Canada, as you know, and that was its purpose. Nothing's changed. 1980s, we had the national energy. Now we've got Trudeau. We have a system that says you're not equal. So how long? It's like the Declaration of Independence said. How long do we need to? And I'm beating this up and paraphrasing it. I could look at it, but how long do those ties have to last? Forever and ever? Or do we look at it at the situation right now, and as parents, as grandparents, make the choice, business people make the choice and say, hey, we got to look at the pros and cons in this. And I think as a government, governing people, not ruling them, saying, listen, this is the only option, and if you don't do this, the whole world's going to fall apart. This whole Chicken Little thing that the media, paid for by Trudeau, by the way, right? So, right. I mean, it's laughable. Everything that there's, Canada as a group could have existed, but the trucker convoy, I think, was the end of that. Basically, it was alienate everybody else. We're the ruling class. This is a neo-feudal system. You are subjects. You will comply. We'll take we'll put you in jail. We'll take your money. We'll freeze your accounts. Peaceful Canadians wanted to say, we wanted a say. You do not have a say. We never have had a say. So we need a say right now. We need the premiers of the Western provinces to say, okay, guys, there is two options to this. And let people present it. Let's have that conversation. Get away from the fear mongering.
Yeah. Well, we knew the conversation would go fast, so before I start rapping with you,
is that all it?
We're not out yet, but before I let you go, then are there plans maybe for events or gatherings or things like that?
Yeah. So we are planning constitutional events. The summertime is better for that kind of stuff. Of course, in the wintertime it's a bit tough. There's nothing right now as in a date made up. Again, a lot of this is funding stuff and so on and so forth, right? So we're working through the details, and Peter and the group have had those conversations so that we can present this information. So yes, and that will come out, and we'll release it as we go, Cory, on the X sites and websites and TikTok and that kind of thing.
Great. Well, and before I let you go then, so if people want to get involved or if they want to find out more, I mean, as I said, we just kind of scratched the tip of the iceberg of the concept here today. Where can they find more information?
Well, right now, the websites need some work. I'll admit that, okay? But as far as the best places, I think John is going to put them up, has put them up already. Yeah. There is X. And the main site you're going to find the information is Real America Fund. There's a realamericafund.ca, which is the web, at Real America Fund on X. There's at Alberta Projects on X, and on TikTok at Alberta 51 Project, I believe. He's got it up there. I can't even remember it myself. I wrote it down earlier. So that's the primary places right now.
Great. And the easiest spot typically for people to find things now anyways, just Google Real America Fund, and I'm sure it's going to point to that site. And we can find out more. Well, thanks for coming in and talk to us about it. And you got your work cut out, but we're in for some really interesting and as I said, tumultuous times. And there's no better time to start discussing these things than now. If nothing else, it's the conversation of the day. So I appreciate you sharing it with us, and we'll be watching closely to see how it goes.
Thank you. And the best is yet to come.
Great.
Let's believe in. Thank you.
All right. So one more time, that was Paul McGregor of the America Fund, or as we said, look for realamericafund.ca, and you'll be able to find them and get some more information. It's kind of an irony that there's a .ca on it, isn't it? But I mean, that's part of getting your websites and SEO things. And as I said, this has been around a long time. Pat Beauchamp and I worked on stuff, working on that concept 25 years ago. It hasn't gained a lot of traction, but the discussion sure has fallen onto our lap now, regardless, hasn't it? And people are discussing it, people are considering it. I see some of the commenters saying, they prefer the independence option and just, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of where I sit with it, but the discussion's there. And maybe farther down, I mean, who knows? Or prior to independence, maybe it's straight to the States. But we have hit a turning point, I think, as a nation. It's a mess. And it's ironic. I think whether it was intentional or not, one of the things that Pierre Poilievre was saying a lot is, pre-campaigning, I guess, and over the time, was that Canada is broken. It was a statement he used a lot. Canada is broken. Canada is broken. Watch, he's going to stop using that. He already has stopped using that. In fact, the legacy media and the usual suspects in Eastern Canada are pressuring and watching for whenever he says this. They say, you're a disloyal man saying that. Well, no, it doesn't matter. If it's broken, it's not a matter of loyalty to point out it's broken. But he's going to back off on that. That's some of the, I think, unintended consequences. I don't know. Nobody could read Trump's mind. I'm not sure if Trump could read Trump's mind, but it's hard to tell where he's coming from. But what I see to a degree, again, you see, is it actually tamped down a bit of discussions now. And now it is this Team Canada thing, so it's actually united a lot of people more. Though others, like Paul and other independence-minded people, it's brought the conversation into the forefront, where now they're starting to scratch their heads. Well, let's talk about this a little bit. Or we weren't even talking about it before. You got to start discussing it. I mean, there are a lot of valid points to be made. If you're going to compare constitutions, if you want to compare GDP per capita, you want to compare the tax base, you want to compare the market access, well, there's a heck of a big case to be made that Alberta would look a lot better as a state than as a province. Now, whether it's a independent province would be better or worse, again, it's a long, huge discussion. The other bigger aspect, as we said, so Paul was saying, he's just looking at Alberta and maybe Saskatchewan in the 51, but when you talk about the whole Canada as a 51, and that's Trump really poking things, there's really no interest across the country for that. And there's a question of how much interest there is on the Americans' part for that, particularly Republican ones. And let's face it, even if Alberta, which is the most conservative province in the country for the most part, though Saskatchewan has fewer Liberal MPs right now, but even if Alberta joined the United States, I could see Alberta being a swing province. It could be a Democrat province. And suddenly they've got an electoral college that's changed, and now you're starting to see more Democrat governments coming in. I'm not sure every Republican wants to see that. Either way, the discussion's there, and discussion is always good. I do like seeing things stirred up. I mean, we can stir things up and come out worse than we went in, or we can come out with something better, and we'll see if something better comes out of this. So let's get on to some other federal things, as things move along. The electric car program. The federal government's softening on that. Speaking of Canada being broke and speaking of Canada being stupid. The federal cabinet minister saying, they may adjust the electric car plan. Guys, it's collapsing. It's screwed. Speaking of tariffs, they just went and, this was a while back, but they put a massive tariff on Chinese electric vehicles to try and promote and force people to domestically buy, because nobody wants the damn things. Let's face it, they're a niche market. They've been shoving them down our throat for like 10 years now, and they still make up a tiny, tiny market share. And then they've discovered the closest thing, the only one who's building a market share successfully to a degree is, oh no, it's the evil Elon Musk and Tesla. So, and it appears that actually sales, again, because of the conflict with the United States right now for Tesla in Canada, it's not a good time to be a Tesla salesman in Canada right now in a lot of places. So, we've put tens of billions of dollars, thanks to that dingbat Trudeau, tossing subsidies, remember, always into Quebec and Ontario companies, of course, to manufacture batteries for this great electric vehicle wave that hasn't come, that isn't coming. He's banned. I mean, think about market disruption. The Dolt has banned the manufacturing of real combustion engine cars within the next, 10 years now? Is it getting up to that deadline? Yep, they're just not going to be, they're going to be illegal. That's obviously going to get repealed because the electric vehicles, the grid, the works, just totally unfeasible. Just idiotic promise. The problem is, when you look at manufacturing, when you look at planning, when you look at businesses, they're not going to invest here on those things because you just don't know. When is he going to reverse that? Or maybe we will be stupid enough in Canada, Quebec and Toronto will put more Liberals in, and these idiots will still keep trying to shove this down our throats. And automobiles, combustion engines being manufactured are illegal in 10 years. Well, who's going to maintain a business like that? Who's going to put money into it? So he's disrupting the market already. I mean, we're going to talk about it a bit on the pipeline a little later. That's another show that'll come on this evening with a panel. I don't know if people have been watching the polls lately, but there's some really strange polls going on out there. We've got David Coletto with, I believe it's Abacus. He's showing that, the Liberals have had a little bit of a bump, now that Trudeau stepped kind of a bit away from the leadership. But still, the Conservatives are far, far ahead. But there's a couple of others. Ecos, well, that's Frank Graves. He's crazy. But some of the others are showing that the Liberals might even beat the Conservatives now. Other pollsters. Really? People, you forget that. That's all it took, was just pulling down Trudeau. All the rest of the trash and garbage underneath him was fine. All of the idiotic policies, all of the debt, all of the inflation, the housing crisis, the mass immigration, that's all okay, just as long as we put Carney in, who had his finger in Trudeau's pie for quite some time while Trudeau was in there. You're not getting rid of anybody, you're just slapping a new coat of paint on it. In fact, you're bringing somebody in who's just the same kind of ideologue as Trudeau, only frighteningly, he's a little bit smart, which makes it much more scary, actually. Trudeau, at least, is an idiot. He just parrots and says what he's told. Carney can think, but he's also a person who can think, who's driven by hardcore ideology. Is Canada really, really considering putting them back in? I tell you what, I'm not saying it's a threat. I'm just saying it's a reality. If the Liberals win this next election, even with a minority, you're going to see an independence movement blossom in Western Canada like you've never seen before. I mean, it won't be just a bit hot. It's going to explode because it will feel hopeless. I mean, the corruption, the foreign interference, the debt, the mismanagement, the bullying, the imbalance, all of that, yet still Central Canada, because let's face it, they're the only ones who can and will put them back. Central and Eastern Canada, says that's fine, we still want more of that. Well, then that last hope of making change within our existing system is gone. And it's all they know how to do is tax, spend, and borrow. I mean, lockdowns, this is some numbers that just came out, that businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, from the lockdowns, the COVID response, and I know Canada wasn't alone in having stupid COVID responses. No, countries all around the world did it. It was a worldwide period of insanity over a flu. But the lockdowns cost Canadian businesses about $60 billion a year, just the small and medium-sized ones, because of the travel bans, because of the lockdowns, because of the restrictions and all that. So what did Trudeau do? Well, he gave out massive loans. And he gave out CERB and paid people to sit at home. He basically created a UBI program. What did that lead to? mass inflation. That's what happens. That's what happens when a government prints money. This is economics 101. This isn't theory. This is as solid as the law of gravity. You pump currency, you pump money, fiat money into the supply, your money becomes devalued and inflation happens. And we just went through it. So now with this tariff thing coming along, we're being warned if 25% tariffs get applied to all Canadian products, this is being threatened, we could be driven right into a recession. Trudeau's first response was, and he even used the parallel, he said we would bring in a COVID level type of package, a spending package to help Canadians through it. That's the best he could come up with, is that we're going to live on the credit cards till we get through the storm. That means more mass inflation. That means more pressure on the entire country. And of course, when we're choking off our producing provinces like Alberta, BC, when we block oil and gas projects, where is this going to come from? We are really up the creek, guys. And hey, Trudeau isn't alone in bad economic policy. We're in bizarro world. I mean, people celebrate Trump as a business genius. Okay, well, I don't know about some of that. Tariffs. Tariffs are stupid policy. They're stupid. They're bad policy. They always have been. They tend to harm your country. If another country wants to sell you a cheap product, let them. Let them. It's saving your citizens money. Upgrade it. Make your own product better or competitive. Or if those products are coming to you from out there at a better price than here, something they're not dumping, and that's not what the case is, which means you're selling below value, let them send it in. Keep your cost of living low. Then you can focus your resources on what you have within your country. Using tariffs to force everything inward just rises the cost to everybody and the inefficiency. But then I saw the Doge idea, which is great, the Department of Government Efficiency, and they got Musk in there, and they've been cutting, and they're cutting, and it's fantastic. And now, though, they're talking, saying, we already see some of the benefits of this, and what we're talking about doing is putting out a one-time $5,000 per person Doge payout, because we've saved so much. Well, how much is your Doge saved? Well, about $700 a person so far. Well, are you lying or stupid? Elon's not stupid. So why are you saying this crap? Because if you go cutting a check for $5,000 to every American, you know what that's going to do to inflation. You know that's what that's going to do to your currency. Why? Why are we... I mean, so quit canonizing these guys. They're doing politics through platitudes, and they're playing to the lowest common denominator. I know economics is boring. I know not everybody wants to read The Road to Serfdom, but read a little bit of Hayek. You know, check out the Austrian school and some of the intellectual economists who've pointed this stuff out. This is not ground that hasn't been trodden before. We know these things don't work, yet we keep going into it. Why? We keep kicking ourselves. So we're coming into an election period. And something I'll give a heads up on, we're going to be expanding our content, by the way. So starting in March, I'm going to be doing a second show through the week. And it's going to be a longer, more extended one. It's going to have very much of an election focus, because the election period is going to go for months. I mean, let's look at our timeline right now. Assuming we get a spring election, who knows? God, there's so many variables going on. It's a pretty safe bet Mark Carney's going to win the leadership in a few weeks. And then he's going to have 2 weeks to get his feet under him or so before there's just no avoiding going to Parliament. Now, here's where one of the bigger variables comes along too. Will he cut a deal with Jagmeet Singh to extend Parliament into fall? I wouldn't be shocked if he does, but chances are pretty good, I think, that a confidence vote is going to come. We're going to have a spring election. We're going to have a lot to cover. It's going to be a very, very important election, a big one. Look at this mess that we are in. And then hopefully getting into June or late May, we're going to have a new prime minister elected by Canadians, whatever way this thing's going to come out. So because of all of that happening for a few months, I'm going to come in another day a week. We're going to cover more of that. We're really going to focus on it. It's going to be a longer, more extended show. And I will have a variety of guests. I mean, we're going to talk about other issues and everything else on the show as well. But that's something else we're going to be doing. We're expanding our digital and broadcast content here at the Western Standard. So be sure to watch all our channels and share them with others, guys, because this is how we'll do it. Legacy media isn't going to cover this. It's another part of this election. One of the things Pierre Poilievre has definitely been strong on, it's a promise I hope if he wins that he follows through on, is defunding that repugnant dinosaur of a state broadcaster, the CBC. And he's also talking about cutting subsidies to the rest of the bloated, out-of-date legacy media dinosaurs that are all going broke out there too. But they're so dependent on the government bailing them out. They are. You thought you saw media bias before you watch this election, because they're fighting for their own lives right now. They're praying the Liberals get back in, because that's the only way they're going to manage to keep going. Look at Chorus Entertainment stock. It's still sitting around 9 cents. They're laying people off all over. That's who runs Global, a bunch of radio stations. All of the major newspapers, almost all of them anyways, are going broke. They're going to rally around the Liberals because that's the only hope for subsidies. But it's pretty sick. That's why independent media is so critical, guys. It's so critical. You got to get media that relies on subscriptions, that relies on readership, that relies on advertising. Doesn't mean there's zero bias, but there's far less, and it's not beholden to the government. That's why even now, I like Daniel Smith. I'm still critical of her when she screws up, and I will be. Because our publication doesn't rely on UCP for its funding or rely on the government, and it's got to stay that way. We don't take tax dollars. We won't. But we're going to have a whole bunch of those guys who do take tax dollars covering the next election, so watch for it. So, guys, again, a little self-serving, but share the links, share the word, get it out there. Keep tuning into this broadcast. I really appreciate you coming in. Get those subscriptions, and keep sending me feedback. Follow me, Cory B. Morgan, on X, and let's keep this conversation going. We're in a very important period of Canadian history, and hopefully we can come out of it better. All right, that's what I got for today, guys. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all again next week at this time.